right now. Today, we are going to look at the slope and y-intercept form of a line. The way we looked at the equation of a line last class was difficult, but also that form isn't very usable. You can't look at the equation of a line like you saw on the last class, and it doesn't tell you much about the line. The beautiful thing about the slope y-intercept form is if you see an equation in that form, you can instantly know the slope, and you can instantly know the y-intercept, and that's enough to tell you information about the line, and it's also enough to help you graph the line, should you wish to do so. So let's define some things first and take a look at some information here. So most lines cross through both the x and y axis. The points at which they do so is called the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So this is the x-intercept right here. It's where the line touches the x-axis. And this is the y-intercept right here. That's the point where it touches the y-axis. When you take a look at the x-intercept always has a y value of 0 because it's on the x-axis, and the y-intercept always has an x value of 0 because it's on the y-axis. Now, the slope and y-intercept form for an equation of a line is given below. This is what you want to remember because there most certainly will probably be a quiz on this tomorrow, and you're going to want to remember this formula. Here it is right here. Y equals mx plus b. So y equals m, and m of course is the slope of the line, times x plus b. Now what does b stand for? Well, b stands for the y-intercept, which again is useful when we think about graphing a line, okay? So we start off this lesson very easily and kind of gradually get a little bit less easy. Find the slope and y-intercept of a line, y equals negative 3x plus 1. So this is just a test of reading, really. M is a slope, and m is negative 3. And b, which is the y-intercept, that's going to be positive 1. That's it. That's all. Okay? We're just taking a look at that equation of the line and figuring out what's what. The number in front of x is the slope, including the sign, and the number floating by itself is the y-intercept. Okie dokie? Okay. Now we're going to get things rolling a little bit, a little more familiar, a little bit more comparison to what we did last class. Write the equation of a line in standard and y-intercept form. If m equals a half and b equals 5. I don't think I said that right. Write the equation of a line in slope and y-intercept form if m equals a half and b equals 5. So that's what we're going to do first. So this is really easy. All we're going to do is write y equals mx plus b. And then m is what? 1 over 2, or a half. And slope is what? Or sorry, y-intercept is what? There you go. There's your equation of the line. No big deal at all. But it does get to be a little bit of a big deal because the next part of the question asks us to do something a little bit different. It asks us to write it in standard form. Ooh, what does that mean? Well, that harkens us back to the last lesson we just did. And standard form is when we see a line in the form a times x plus b times y and plus c equals 0. No big deal. We're just going to move everything over to one side, right? Okie dokie. So we're going to bring the y over to the right side, and we're going to have 1/2 x minus y plus 5 equals 0. Except there's one little itty bitty problem here. Yes? Oh, my apologies for being sloppy. That's b, y. So we have 1/2 x minus y plus 5 equals 0. Why is this not in standard form? Anyone remember? No. What's wrong with the last thing written in blue? Why is that not in standard form? Because it's a fraction. We can't have a fraction. So we got to ask ourselves, what do? Well, we're going to multiply both sides by whatever the denominator is. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. So half times 2 is just 1. So that's just x. Minus 2 times y. Plus 5 times 2 is 10. Equals 0. So that line in standard form is x minus 2y plus 10 equals 0. Okay? So there's two different things here. There's two different parts to this answer. There's two things we are asked for. We are asked to write the equation of the line in slope y-intercept form, which we did right there. We're also asked to write it in standard form, which is right there. Okay? I'm going to be honest with you. In your future, in other words, on quizzes and tests, I can see me saying, here's an equation of a line in one of these two forms. Give me the other one. Okay? So make sure you can bring it from one to the other. What else do I want to say here? Again, slope y-intercept form is way more useful because you can look at the equation and say, hey, the slope is a half. Hey, the y-intercept is 5. And then you can say, hey, I can graph it now. But if we take a look at x minus 2y plus 10, and you say, well, what's the slope? Oh, what's the y-intercept? So it's not as useful, right? The usefulness is in the first form of the line. So lots of things we do in math beyond grade 10, or when we're doing applications and stuff, you're going to want to lean towards the top rather than the bottom, but you need to know how to do both. Okay? Okie dokie. So here's the $1 million question here. What's the slope and y-intercept of 6x minus 2y plus 10 equals 0? How do we do that? Well, to answer that question, what we have to do is we have to take that equation that's in standard form and write it in slope y-intercept form. So in other words, what we have to do is we have to take this and write it into y equals mx plus b form. And you may say to me, how do we do that? Well, get y by itself. You've got two sides of an equal sign. Bring y to one of the sides and make sure it's all by itself. Okay, so here's the deal. I've got 3 things on the left side and nothing on the right. To make this easiest, I'm just going to bring the 2y over there. So we're going to have 6x plus 10 equals positive 2y. Now, once we have that, if we want to continue this on, if we want to get rid of the y, or get the y by itself, we have to divide everything by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3x, plus 10 divided by 2 is 5, and that's equal to y. So now this equation is solved for y. And once you solve for y, then you can figure out the slope and you can find out the y-intercept. What's the slope? 3, because it's the number in front of x. What's the y-intercept? 5. Donezo. So, slope 3, y-intercept 5. Good. There we go. Okay? So, if you have just some random equation of a line and you want to figure out what the slope and y-intercept is, put it into slope y-intercept form. In other words, get y all by itself. Then you can go ahead and do that. And why would you put an equation in slope y-intercept form? In other words, what value does the slope and the y-intercept have? Well, if you know what the slope and the y-intercept are, then you can do this. You can draw a graph. You can graph the line. So we take a look at y equals 2/3 x minus 4. What's the slope? 2/3, because it's beside the x. What's the y-intercept? negative 4. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to start off with the y-intercept. Y-intercept's negative 4. There's our first point. You always start with the y-intercept because it's like your anchor point. It's where you start. Then what we do, we need to then go ahead and figure out how to draw a slope of 2/3, Mr. Danielson. Rise, run, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. Do as many times as you want. And then what you're going to probably want to have here, because you're graphing a line, is you're going to probably want to have something that would help you draw a straight line. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take one of those fancy little tools, and you're going to want to connect the dots. And just like that, you've got yourself a pretty little line. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next one. This one, the line's drawn for us, and it asks us to find the slope and the y-intercept and then write the equation. So first of all, let's talk about slope and y-intercept. If I talk about slope, I'm talking about m. If I talk about the y-intercept, we're talking about b. So b is super easy. What's b? What's b? It is. The slope is going to force us into figuring it out. So let's see here. I'm going to go over 1, and then I'm going to go down 3. Over 1, down 3. Over 1, down 3. Over 1, down 3. Obviously, it does that all the time. So down 3, down is negative, so that's going to be negative 3. Over 1, so that's a 1. Slope is rise over run, so rise over run. The rise is negative 3 over 1. And because it's negative 3 over 1, we can just write it as negative 3. Okay, so the slope is negative 3, and the y-intercept is 4. Now, it says to write the equation. Well, the equation is y equals mx plus b. So that's y equals negative 3x plus 4. And that's it. That's all. Done. Okay? So you're just taking a picture of the graph, and you're looking at what's the y-intercept, what's the slope, and just working it out from there. Okay. Okay, moving on. Last example. Ooh. The equation of the line is negative 3x plus b. If the line passes through the point 2,4, what's the value of b? So obviously the unknown in this question is the y-intercept. Okay? The unknown is the y-intercept, but it tells us a point on the line. How do we find out what b is? Well, this isn't too tricky. We take a look at this right here, y equals negative 3x plus b. This is an equation, okay? This equation has 3 variables, y, x, and b. And we're given the point 2, 4. Now 2, 4 represents x and y, so we're just going to replace x and y with 2 and 4 respectively. So that's going to be 4 equals negative 3 times 2 plus b. So our only unknown now is b. So we're going to get 4 equals negative 6 plus b. We're going to bring the negative 6 over to the left side, and we're going to get 4 plus 6, and that's going to be equal to b. So b is 10. Now this question doesn't ask you to write an equation or what's the equation. The question asks you to find the value of b. So once you've found the value of b, Bob's your uncle, you're done. The answer is 10. All right, so I'm going to give out your homework. It is on those pages, but it's in an old book anyway. And we're going to do a quiz on this tomorrow. So make sure to do your work.